Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Mehlaka Samdani. I am the director at Community Alliance for Peace and Justice, an advocacy group that seeks to improve U.S. foreign policy towards the Middle East and South Asia. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are gathering today at a very critical moment. Just last night, a ceasefire was announced between Iran and the U.S., brokered by Pakistan, and it came after a period of dangerous escalation. To see how the 40-day conflict and the current ceasefire are being viewed inside Iran, we are extremely fortunate to be joined by a renowned scholar, Dr. Foad Izadi, who is a professor at the University of Tehran, where he specializes in American studies and U.S. foreign policy. Professor Izadi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Professor, let's begin with the ceasefire itself. How is it being viewed inside Iran? Is it being considered a victory? Is it a tactical pause? Or do you believe this is a genuine diplomatic opening?
It could be all of three. We are hoping that this would end the war. Iran was not interested in fighting the United States or Israel. There was a diplomatic solution available. I don't know if you saw the interview of the Omani foreign minister with CBS News. Before the war, he went to Washington. He said that an agreement was available, and he said they could reach an agreement within 24 hours. But the Trump administration was not interested in an agreement. They wanted to change Iran's government, and you don't enter an agreement with the government that you want to change. And so they started these bombings. We had the former National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, saying that the concessions that Iranians were offering to the other side was quite extensive. And this is him saying that Witkoff and Kushner did not understand what Iranians were, what they were talking about, because I guess they were not really interested in having a negotiated settlement. So the war started, and the first days of war, Trump and Netanyahu asked the Iranians to come to the streets in millions, and they did, shouting against Trump and Netanyahu. They managed to unite Iranians more than any Iranian politician could ever do. And then they started hitting civilian targets from the first day. We had the school in southern Iran, more than 165 little girls, primary school, hit with American Tomahawk missiles. It was a double tap, so they hit it, and then they had some rescue workers, some parents going to rescue the children, and then there was another American Tomahawk missile landing in the same area. And they have attacked more than 250 hospitals, universities, railroads, all civilian targets. Before the genocide in Gaza, Netanyahu called Palestinians Amalek, and before the war in Iran, Netanyahu went to a military base, Israeli military base, and he called Iranians Amalek. And in their twisted ideology, if they label a nation Amalek, they get to kill their women and children. So Iran has lost more than 2,000 civilians, lots of damage to infrastructure. Trump, a couple of days ago, was talking about ending Iranian civilization. Iranian civilization is more than 6,000 years old. He is interested in Iranian oil. In his interview with Financial Times, he said he wants to take Iranian oil, and The other day, reporters asked him, "Why would you want to do that?" And he said, "I'm a businessman. I like to make money." He has talked about changing Iran's borders. They have not been able to do any of these things.
Right.
And after this ceasefire announcement, we had a lot of celebrations. People were basically realizing that the country has managed to survive a very substantial attack by two nuclear regimes. Iranian government does not have nuclear weapons, the other side does, and they used all they had against Iran. And the US spends 100 times more on its military in comparison to Iran. And the fact that the country has survived is a sign of national pride. People are proud of soldiers that have sacrificed their lives defending their country. And this celebration continues. Of course, people also remember the past negotiations. Iran was attacked 2 times in the middle of negotiations, one in June of last year. Trump called the operation in June Midnight Hammer. He took that hammer and smashed the negotiating table. Iran provided Trump with another table in February. Again, the United States attacked Iran in the middle of that negotiation. So when Trump talks about negotiations, people worry more about war.
Sure.
So this was the good news until about noon time, Tehran time. And then we started hearing the news from Lebanon. We have lost more than 100 civilians, about 500 injuries.
Absolutely.
And Lebanon was part of the ceasefire. So they started violating the ceasefire from the first day. And this is an Israeli practice, the same way they attacked hospitals in Gaza, schools in Gaza. They did the same in Iran. And since the ceasefire in Gaza, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed. So in Israeli terminology, a ceasefire is for the other side. They shouldn't shoot back, but Israelis can shoot and kill in the middle of ceasefire anytime they want, as they did today in Lebanon. We had an attack on an Iranian island in the Persian Gulf, oil facilities, today about 10 a.m. We have drones, American and Israeli drones, roaming around Iranian airspace. These are all violations of the ceasefire. We had the Pakistani Prime Minister in his statement, he specifically said Lebanon, a ceasefire in Lebanon should be part of this agreement. And Israelis are not accepting that. So the fear that people have is that with all these violations, Iran has no other choice but to return to what Iran was doing in the last 40 days.
Right.
This is the difficulty that
Professor Izadi, that's exactly right. I mean, the terms of the ceasefire were almost immediately violated. I think just today, the Pakistani ambassador to the US again confirmed that Lebanon was included in the ceasefire. But then there's also some reporting that's out there that says that, but almost immediately, President Trump had told Netanyahu to absolutely go ahead with attacking Lebanon as well. So, given the immediate violations that are happening, we're still here. Do you believe that Israel will continue to act as a spoiler if this ceasefire between Iran and the US then heads into negotiations that are currently being planned in Islamabad on Friday?
The general belief here is that this is a good cop, bad cop practice. They are coordinating with each other. This was Trump's statement after the 12-day war, that he works with Netanyahu as a team. So I think what the Israelis did today was something that they coordinated with the United States. Generally, Israelis cannot do anything in terms of war making unless they get support from the United States, because they get their weapons from the United States, they get their money from the United States, they get their political support from the United States, propaganda support from the United States. So Israel is nothing without the United States. And this is, yes, seriously jeopardizing the talks. We don't know if Iranian delegation will go to Islamabad on Friday. There are some people who are questioning the usefulness of that trip, because Israelis have started violating this ceasefire from the first day in the manner they did, killing and injuring hundreds of people. So there are serious doubts about the future of the ceasefire.
And, I think it was just today that President Pezeshkian mentioned that, yes, we are going ahead with the negotiations. We do plan to send our delegation to Pakistan. That was earlier today. But there also seems to be some reports about the IRGC and other segments of the Iranian leadership who are not completely on board because they do not trust the Israelis and the Americans with these negotiations. So who within Iran is actually making those decisions at this point? Who is the ultimate arbiter in terms of whether there will be negotiations, whether a delegation will go to Pakistan? And just also generally in this time of crisis, is it the Office of the Supreme Leader? Is it the IRGC? Is it the Supreme National Security Council? Who is actually determining what happens next?
I don't know if you have read Iran's constitution. I would encourage you to do it. It's an interesting read. In Iran's constitution, we have this National Security Council. The president of the National Security Council is the country's president, Dr. Pezeshkian. There are 4 ministers, foreign minister, 3 other ministers. And then you have the head of judiciary, the head of the parliament. You have 2 representatives from the leader present, and then you have the head of the Iranian military. Mm-hmm. They make decisions about these issues. They represent the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and others, military, others. They make these decisions, and so if Iran goes to Islamabad on Friday, it's a decision that they made. If Iran realizes that going to Islamabad is not useful, they make the decision. They make all the decisions when it comes to these issues. Iranian parliament, like other parliaments, they pass laws. For example, they are working on a law for Strait of Hormuz. So this is how the Iranian government functions.
So are you saying that everybody's sort of on the same page with respect to these negotiations going forward?
Yes, of course, there are always disagreements. I think you're running an NGO. Among the directors of NGO, there are sometimes disagreements. This is human beings when they sit around the table. Sometimes they disagree. But we have in Western news outlets a line of not serious reporting, trying to sort of divide and conquer, and said that demonize this segment of Iranian government, demonize the other segment, create talking points to blame Iran at the end of the day, instead of blaming Israel for all the atrocities. I was on the Sky News today, and I mentioned that Lebanon was heavily bombed, and this anchor was telling me, well, this is a response to the ceasefire violations on Iran. I said, what are you talking about? Which violation did Iran do? So it's sad. Sometimes we look at these Western media outlets and we feel sorry for the people who have to consume uh,
Of course.
garbage.
Didi, if I could just interrupt you for a second, could you raise the volume a little bit at your end? I think people might have are having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
I'm not sure how that is done. Am I
I
supposed
can
to
hear
do that
you
in
fine.
Zoom?
I'm not sure. I would just somebody of our audience members said, um, let me see.
Yeah, this output is 100%.
Okay,
So I'm
don't
not
worry
sure.
about it. If you, we can hear you just fine.
Okay,
So hopefully it will. I've raised the volume at our end, but anyway.
okay.
Okay. So, uh, Dr. Izadi, I did want to ask. I mean, initially, or earlier, Iran had said that, we will not enter into a temporary ceasefire. This is a 2-week ceasefire, and that we do want to see a permanent end to the conflict. Why do you think Iran agreed to this?
You know, Iran is basically trying to see whether uh, this can lead to a permanent end of hostilities. That's why there is this 2 week deadline. Uh, what Iran was saying is that they don't want. I think we have some background noise, which is okay as long as it's okay with you.
Oh, yes, I can't hear the background noise. You're
Okay,
fine.
okay, good. Uh, what Iranian leaders have been saying is that they don't want to go to war with the United States and Israel every few months. They attacked Iran in June, they attacked Iran in February. Uh, we don't want to do this again. Iran has a population of over 90 million. You cannot run a country of 90 million people with two nuclear regimes attacking you every few months. So the reason Iranian delegation is going to Islamabad, if they actually make it there, is to see whether they can be assured of a permanent end to these wars. And if they can see that, then that is one of the objectives that they have. And if they see this is just a deception operation, like the two other negotiations that Iran had with the United States, deception operations. These are not my words. There are extensive reporting on this. Wall Street Journal did that. Hudson Institute did that about how the United States used deception to make the Iranian side feel that they're actually negotiating while they were planning for war. So that's the determination that Iranian leaders will make.
So, yes, and of course, like Iran had said from the very beginning that we just want to ensure that we are not attacked again. Who do you think in the region or beyond can provide that kind of security guarantee to Iran? Somebody or a country that has enough leverage over both Iran and the US. Who do you think that could be? And who do you see as a credible mediator in all of this? I know Pakistan is facilitating those talks, but who do you see as a credible mediator who can enforce those guarantees?
I don't think that we are dealing with the Epstein class. They they don't want to follow international law. They are not going to listen to any mediators. They are not interested in uh, basically behaving like normal countries. You don't go on a rampage attacking other countries, killing their leaders, killing their people. Uh, Part of that 10-point demand that Iran has is a UN resolution, but we had a UN resolution with the nuclear agreement. Trump could care less. So the answer to your question is nobody. No country is going to be able to do that. The only guarantee that Iran will have is Iran's military force. If they violate and attack Iran again, Iran has no other choice but to defend itself.
Right. And over this period, over the 40-day war that was waged against Iran, the Strait of Hormuz became this point of leverage. And we also know that it's a key pressure point for the US as well. For Trump, it was very obvious that reopening the Strait of Hormuz was a very, big point, and that is something that he wanted to condition in for the ceasefire. Do you believe that Iran now thinks that this is the point of leverage, that it should never give up? And at any time there is any kind of military escalation, it has the Strait of Hormuz. It has that even when it keeps it open, it should retain control. I think just today, as soon as Israel started striking Lebanon, Iran again announced that is now going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think that the Strait of Hormuz has become this thing which provides Iran with that leverage and acts as a deterrent now to other countries?
It does, and it's in international law. We have this Convention on Law of Seas. The territorial waters of countries, Iran, any other country, United States, is 12 miles. That is the territorial waters. And then they add another 12 miles to the territorial waters, and they call it uh, contiguous waters. That's the
Yeah.
terminology. And in your territorial waters, you can act and pass laws and regulations the same way you do in your land.
Mhm.
Territorial waters are considered to be part of that country. And in contiguous waters, the laws of the coastal state needs to be respected, especially when it comes to security issues that violate the security of that coastal state. Uh, the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles altogether. The width is 21 miles. And that means you do the math, you got 12 miles of Iranian territorial waters, 12 miles of Oman territorial waters. That's 24, which is 3 miles more than 21. So Strait of Hormuz falls within territorial waters of Iran and Oman. We have some misreporting in Western media outlets saying that these are the Strait of Hormuz is in international waters.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
accurate. These are Iranian territorial waters, Omani territorial waters. That means that Iran and Oman determine what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. Article 17 and the Convention on Law of Seas says that yes, passage is possible through these waterways, but it says innocent passage, and that innocent is the key word in the eyes of Iranians. Article 19 defines innocent, and it says the ship that is passing through should not cause security problems for the coastal state. So coastal states have an standing in international law when it comes to this type of straits. When you attack a country, kill more than 3,000 people, you are violating the security of that country, needless to say. So American ships are not allowed. Israeli ships are not allowed. These are territorial waters of Iran. Why would Iran want to allow the enemy ships to go through? And other ships that are not helping these enemy countries are free to go. One reason many of these ships are not going is because this is a war zone. 45 days ago, there was no problem in the Strait of Hormuz. All these difficulties started with the illegal war of US and Israel. And so the insurance companies are not allowing these ships to go through. Some of them are going with coordination with Iran. We had this French ship from France carrying fertilizers. They went through a couple of days ago. So when the French had a choice, the French government had a choice between fertilizers and Trump, they chose fertilizers. And other ships have been going through, Pakistani ships have been going through. So they should not. And we have some of these Persian Gulf countries that provided bases to the United States. Today, the Joint Chief of Staff thanked these countries for fighting with the United States against Iran. I haven't seen any of these countries denying their involvement in this war. The war was illegal. If you want to attack a country, you need to go to the UN Security Council, put that country under Article 43 of Chapter 7, and the US didn't do that. Israelis didn't do that. So the attack on Iran is against international law, and aiding an attack that is illegal under international law is also illegal. So the countries that provided these bases, they are going to pay when they go through, because of the damage they caused to Iran. Iran has suffered billions of dollars worth of damage. The money for that compensation will come through the transit fee that Iran will level at the Strait of Hormuz.
And so, yeah, so it plans to continue to do that. Last night there was the reopening of the Hormuz that Iran had declared that it will go ahead and do. But right now, I guess it's closed again as a result of Israeli attacks on Lebanon. But when it does reopen, you're saying that it will charge transit fees to anybody who goes through, or is it just those ships that are considered somewhat hostile?
This is a law that the Iranian parliament is working on, and Iranian and Omani officials have been talking about this. This is very customary practice. The countries that are members of this Convention on Law of Seas, Australia, Denmark, Canada, they charge fees. They don't call it a transit fee, they call it pilotage fee. But they charge. It's not small. Australia charges more for oil tankers because of the risk they have for environment. And the countries that are not a member, like Turkey, they just call it transit fee. Turkey charges a transit fee for every ship based on the weight of the ship. You can Google this. You do Turkey, the Straits transit fee. This was very much covered in the news outlets because they increased that fee by 15% a few months ago. Iran is not a member of the Convention on Law of Seas, neither is US, neither is Israel. So Iran can level that tax and call it transit fee. And Iran will do that because Iran has suffered extensively. And so the countries that help the US, provided bases for US, they are going to pay for it. And friendly countries, they could some arrangements could work out. Iran is not trying to hurt anyone. Iran is trying to make sure that this strait that lies within Iranian territorial waters is not used against Iran as a coastal state. And this is not too much to ask.
Sure. So coming back to the negotiations, Dr. Izadi, if the Iranian delegation does go ahead and go to Islamabad, do you believe that it will accept having Witkoff and Jared Kushner as the as representing the the American delegation? They did reject them last time, and there is news of J.D. Vance also going. But will Witkoff and Kushner be deemed legitimate representatives?
They're of course not legitimate because they were part of the deception 2 times, and they work for Netanyahu as far as I can tell. I don't think they're working for Trump. I think they're implementing Netanyahu's wishes. At the end of the day, it's not the Iranian decision to to determine who is in the US delegation. But if I were Trump, if I was really interested in a peace deal with Iran, I would not send these 2 guys because they have divided loyalties. I think they're more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States.
Sure. Now, between Iran and the US, the two proposals that are being floated, Trump came out with his 15-point plan, Iran came up with its 10-point plan, and they're completely diametrically opposed to one another. Trump, through his plan, is trying to really limit Iran's regional role, its nuclear program, its missiles program, and is offering sanctions relief. In return. And Iran's plan does the exact opposite. It wants to retain control of the Strait of Hormuz. It wants full sanctions lifted. It wants security guarantees. And it wants the right to be able to enrich uranium. Given how far apart these two plans are, what hope do you have that there will be any kind of a breakthrough in Islamabad or any negotiations going forward? Or do you believe that there has been back channel diplomacy happening and there's been some movement towards some of these elements, especially around nuclear enrichment?
The hope is not that much because of the history that we have with the United States. I think the Trump administration would realize sooner or later that this was a failed policy. Trump has this ability to declare victory when the policy is failing, and then he would go off to other things. This is the hope that Iranians have. But if they expect Iran to limit its ballistic missiles, that's not going to happen because Iran needs these missiles to hit Tel Aviv and Haifa when Iran is attacked by Israelis. And other things, compensation, the Strait of Hormuz issue, the idea that this should be the end of the war, these are not things that Iran can compromise on. So either they accept these very reasonable demands, or Iran has to go back and defend itself the way Iran has done for the last 40 days.
Right. And so, in terms of, I just wanted to sort of hone in on the nuclear enrichment part of it. Does Iran want to have the right? I mean, it does have the right to, but, in terms of these negotiations, does it want to keep the right to enrich uranium for civilian purposes? Is there any conversation around what the US wants for it to give up its uranium stockpile? Are you privy to any of those conversations within Iran that are happening, that there might be some movement around?
I encourage you to read this annual threat assessment last year. This is the work of the U.S. intelligence community. Tulsi Gabbard presented this report last year, and it said three things about Iran's nuclear program. The first thing was that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. The second thing it said that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon program. And the third thing it says is that Iranian leaders have not decided to have a nuclear weapon program. When they asked Trump about this report, which is the consensus of the US intelligence community, he dismissed it and he attacked Iran in June. And again this year when Tulsi Gabbard was at the US Senate, senators asked her about what she said last year, and she refused to deny the fact that the US intelligence community was not worried about Iran building nuclear weapons. So the issue is not enrichment. If someone is worried about nuclear weapons in Iran, the best way would be to have JCPOA again, because under the JCPOA, Iran could not enrich more than 3.65%. You cannot find any nuclear scientist that would tell you you can build a nuclear bomb with 3.65%. Iran was under extensive inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And Trump left that agreement because I don't think he was really worried about Iran's nuclear program. He said he totally destroyed Iran's nuclear program in June. Then again, he attacked Iran with the same idea of destroying Iran's nuclear program. So overall, I don't think they are worried about Iran's nuclear program. If they were, they would return to that agreement, or return to an agreement similar to it, and Trump can call it the Trump agreement.
Of course. But there is, people do wonder, Dr. Izadi, that given the way Trump, tore up the JCPOA, the way they have gone and attacked and carried out this war of aggression against Iran, that perhaps it might not be a bad idea for Iran to develop nuclear weapons as a deterrent. Is there a debate within Iran around that possibility, given how much leverage it now has? And just as a credible deterrent to prevent that from prevent those attacks happening again.
Yes, there is a debate. People are wondering whether Iran can continue to resist and fight back when Iran is attacked by two nuclear regimes. There are some people in Iran that say that that's not possible. So there is a debate going on that issue.
I see. And is there this is just a technical question. I should probably know this as well. The fatwa that was passed decades earlier about Iran not developing nuclear weapons, was that issued? Is that still in place, or has that been removed? Just in terms of religious reasons, if you could sort of let me know what the status of that fatwa is.
It is still in place, but under Islamic theology, and a jurist can have his own fatwa. We haven't heard a new fatwa coming from the new leader in Iran, but he doesn't have to follow the old fatwa. He can have a new fatwa. I'm not sure if he will change that fatwa or not, but he can if he wants to.
I see. Thank you for that. Just a couple more questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience as well. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Gulf-Iran ties. Prior to the war, there were efforts, especially after the Saudi-Iran rapprochement, to stabilize relations in the Gulf. Do you think after everything that has happened over the past 40 days, those gains have now been completely reversed? Is there any way in the near future to sort of salvage some of those relations?
Iran is interested in having good relations with Iran's neighbors. You cannot choose your neighbors, so the best way would be to accommodate them as much as you can. And you're right, Iran worked very hard to maintain some level of good relations with these countries. Unfortunately, these countries provided bases for an illegal attack on Iran. We had this in Wall Street Journal the other day, that Iranian drones hit 5 American refueling airplanes in a Saudi base, not an US base in Saudi Arabia, a Saudi base. And Trump tried to dismiss that, and he said that it wasn't 5, it was 1, which is actually acknowledging the fact that Saudis were providing bases to the Americans. On the second day of war, Kuwaitis said that they shot down 3 US airplanes by mistake. And before that, they had said that they would not allow their airspace to be used by the Americans. But how can you shoot down American airplanes if they are not in your airspace? They were. So we have a lot of reports. Today, this Secretary of War Crimes said that the United States has hit 13,000 sites in Iran. You cannot do that using aircraft carriers that are about 2,000 kilometers away. These bases were used for these attacks on Iran. So Iran is quite disappointed that these neighbors, instead of just watching, they had the option of just watching. We had 2 years of genocide in Palestine, and they're good at watching. They didn't do anything for the genocide. But they chose to work with the US, as it's said by government officials in the United States. So making those relationships positive again would not be an easy task. I think at the end of the day, Iran will try to forget and forgive. But the hope that Iran has is that these countries will also realize that providing bases to the United States is not giving them security. In fact, it's causing them serious problems.
The UAE, it seems, is firmly in Israel's camp. It has made that very, very clear. Do you believe there's been some movement from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to sort of remove itself from that grouping? I mean, it never very overtly ever, normalized relations with Israel or anything, but has been, according to reports, a proponent of this war. But do you believe that with every passing day, Saudi Arabia is sort of moving away from that?
We don't see any evidence that they are moving away. As you said, we have a lot of reports saying that the Saudis want the U.S. to fight Iran more. So we don't see any positive outcomes coming out of Saudi Arabia.
I see. So just this one last question, and perhaps this was the most important question, Dr. Izadi, and that is about the people of Iran. How have they been faring through this entire 40-day period? What has been the immediate impact of the war on everyday life in Iran, economically, socially, psychologically? How do different segments of Iranian society perceive this trajectory of war? And is there a gap between official narratives and public sentiment? What can you tell us about the mood in Iran?
The mood is a mood of defiance. There is this culture of resistance here. Every night we have millions of people coming to the streets shouting against Trump and Netanyahu. There is this rally around the flag effect. Of course, people are suffering because of economic hardship uh,
Mhm.
that the war is creating. But that doesn't mean that they want to be foot soldiers for Trump or Netanyahu. They understand who Trump is. They understand who Netanyahu is. They know these are war criminals, fascists, people who kill babies, engage in genocide. Uh, as I said, Trump has managed to unite Iranians more than any Iranian politician could ever do.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure we have lots of different questions. I'm going to now invite Dr. Atika Batul, who is also a CAPJ board member, to sort of join us. I'm going to invite her in. Hi, Atika. If
Hello.
you please turn to the audience questions now and maybe ask the first question of
So I actually kind of went through the questions and compressed them into three big points, which include some of my own inputs also. And one of them was primarily half answered in terms of Iran's relationship with GCC. But Dr. Izadi, how do you see this evolving in future? And I'm going to break this down into GCC, Saudi, and Pakistan in particular, because that's another player in all of this. And the late Dr. Ali Larijani in 2025, when he visited, he clearly said that, I'm offering a blank check of support to Pakistan. But clearly there's been other influences which has led to the region not being able to go together. And I think one of the big Zionist agenda is to play upon the rift of Shia-Sunni divide, which has been a big factor in this, again, Ayatollah Khamenei always stressed upon the unity of the Muslim world. So how do you see this working out in future, and what are some of the measures that may perhaps heal those rifts?
The Persian Gulf states, southern part of the Persian Gulf, need to realize that uh, uh, trusting the United States for their security is not a good idea. Trusting Israelis for their security is not a good idea. These are rich countries. They can manage on their own, but the problem is that these are client states of the United States, so sometimes they don't have that much say. These U.S. bases, some areas of these U.S. bases are designated for U.S. citizens only. Because of their dependency on the United States, no matter how much Iran tries to uh, be attractive to them, that's not going to happen because they're not making decisions on their own. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that Iran will not try. I think Iran will continue to try to see if they can improve relations, especially after the war.
All right. The second question, and quite a few individuals brought it up, were with regards to Palestine, because Iran's always been a staunch supporter for Palestine and the freedom to establish the independent Palestinian state. So, is a ceasefire, Lebanon's included, but is Palestine, Gaza still a priority of this deal that U.S. and Israel are going to make? With Iran? And would that include opening up the borders to allow aid to get into Gaza freely because they have been suffering for a long time? And how far is Iran willing to take this in terms of, standing by? And Iran stated that clearly that, our neighbors are important. Lebanon's important, Palestine and Gaza is important. But what are some of the measures that Iran is willing to take to put that forward?
So you already saw one example when the Israelis attacked Lebanon, the ships stopped going through the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran wants to see peace in this part of the world. That means Israelis are not supposed to be attacking their neighboring countries, killing people. And that's going to be important for Iran. Other details, I think, will be worked out as they go through this agreement. If they go to Islamabad, we are not sure if Iranian delegation will go there.
And what about the reopening of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, access to Muslims? Do you see that happening?
I don't know. We are dealing with a genocidal regime. They kill little babies. Whether they want to open the Al-Aqsa Mosque or not this is another issue. These are things that will happen, I think, gradually once this axis of resistance becomes more powerful.
Stronger.
The only language that Israelis understand is the language of force.
All right. And the last question we have is actually, I'll just split that into two. But first of all, Israel's always hid behind the United States. The United States being the front, while they continue their background attacks. Even though, we can say clearly that their representatives were included in the U.S. team of negotiators, but should there not be a clear engagement or an upfront engagement between the Israeli officials, the American officials? There's a lot of deception. There's a lot of misinformation, which is, propagated. And it has been stated now repeatedly within US media that Israeli goals and American goals are not aligning for this war even. So why just engage the US team only? Why are there not Israeli officials part of the negotiating team?
Because the US team is working for the Israeli officials.
Well, you're right in that, but I guess the question really is that we should have like a clear front instead of them hiding behind the US officials. We know that they work together, they work as a tag team, as you said, good cop, bad cop. But is there any behind the scene or front of the scene direct engagement between the two countries or the three countries? Two of them already engaged, but Iran in particular.
Iran's solution for Palestine is one man, one vote. The same thing that happened in South Africa. These people have occupied other people's land. They need to go back to Europe where they came from.
All right.
There was another question, Dr. Izadi. It says, there were attacks. I think there was Kuwait and Saudi and perhaps Qatar as well that claimed that there were attacks by drones in their territories today. And the question is, were the apparent attacks on the GCC countries today minimal, and were they false flag operations? Are they being...
I don't know. I've been busy doing these interviews. It's possible that Iran has done it in response to the attack on the Iranian island at 10 a.m. this morning. It's possible that it came from Iran, but I don't know if Iranian officials have accepted the responsibility or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Atika, are there other questions that we need to get to?
No, I don't see any. I think we compressed and we addressed all of them.
We know it's extremely late at your end, Dr. Izadi, and so we don't want to keep you for much longer. But are there any parting words that you would give to us? There are many Americans who are listening in at this point. Anything that you would like us to do to support Iran as it's sort of trying to ward off this aggression? What can Americans, ordinary Americans, do?
Uh, don't rely on the mainstream corporate media because they generally don't present the actual facts. Looking at alternative media would actually give you more information. We have some news outlets that have been doing a good job in the last 40 days. Uh, One way to sell this war is to demonize Iran. So realizing that Iran is actually trying to defend itself is going to be a good idea.
Those are excellent points. Thank you so much. And I think over the past 40 days, at least on social media, we have seen this eruption of, accounts where people are getting to see Iran up close and very closely in terms of the culture, in terms of the art, in terms of the architecture and the people, the resilience of the people. And I think that's been inspiring a lot of people. And we do greatly, greatly appreciate your time, your expertise, and your wisdom. You've left us with a lot to think about. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you.